how you want to gather, but we're not meeting in a park or out to dinner. You're gonna come over to our clean house, and we're just gonna visit. So that's what we're gonna do. So
That's great. I'm glad to hear it. It's because this is too much, man.
yeah, and again, when it goes to grieving, we have not. It's not like we can go back and say we've done this before. No one's done this before. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And in fact, I believe you. It does start with grieving.
So we are now live, and I would like to thank you, Margot, for coming on. And let's go. Welcome to Dr. Paul. This is Bridges Live, and of course, people can always reach me on drpaulholisticscience.com. But of course, I always like to have some amazing guests on, and Margot's one of my guests. And please introduce yourself, Margot, to our audience, and we can get right into talking about diversity and inclusion, the things you do and the things you're passionate about.
It's a real honor to be here. And before we get going, everybody who's listening needs to understand that I'm an introvert. So it's really makes me very nervous to be here today. But I'm thrilled to be here. And in fact, what really drew me to showing up today is that your focus on holistic health.
Yes.
So I did a PhD at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco. And I'm a Canadian girl, so that was a really odd thing for me to be doing.
How so?
Because it was really non-traditional. So what happened was my first husband died of cancer when I was 35. And we made a commitment that I'd find a PhD program to act as a container as I worked through my grief, because we knew it was going to be really hard. So after a couple of years, I started to look for a program. And at that time, I wanted to study spirituality in organizations, because I was appalled at the way I'd been treated in the corporate world as a widow, given no space to grieve. And all the messaging that I was given was, you're young, things will change, just focus on your career, everything will be fine. And I was like, no, it doesn't work that way. My dad died when I was 11. And you just don't work through these things.
One of the things that I love doing, like, when it comes to natural health is natural health. If I'll give a short synopsis for people who have never understood what natural health is. That is including all things of all things. And what does that mean? It means your environment. It means your human multi-celled species. It means your universe. It means your upbringing. It means your development. It means your cultivation. That is the inclusion of who we are. And we've never been taught singly how to grieve. We've never been taught how to grieve. We've always been taught to, like, you hear more or less, pull yourself together, move on, move past it. And that is not how life works, because as an ecosystem, we don't move past it as like a tree. And I know I'm outside and I'm enjoying the nature, but nature doesn't move past it. It includes. And that's what's so great about when you talk about inclusion and diversity. This is not about separation. This is not about power over system. This is not about who is right and who isn't as right as you thought they would be. This is about including the ecosystem, meaning growing together. And that's exactly what you're in, and that's exactly what you've been doing.
Exactly. So, I found the school and a community, and for me, that's part of our path forward. is that we look at ourselves, our relationships with each other, our relationships within our family, our relationship within our communities, our relationship within our nation states, our relationship globally. And for me, inclusion is reliant upon the thinking of quantum. So,
Mm-hmm.
What is inside me is mirrored on the outside, and vice versa.
Yes. We're the microcosm of the macrocosm, and in quantum development there is no energy that is all by itself. It pings off of each other, and if when people have listened to me talk about the different things, when I talk about energy, when I talk about frequency, when I talk about wave vibrations, we if you it's almost like sometimes when I write, I'm like, if you don't know now that life is a frequency, life is a wave vibration that rivets throughout the universal between that time, this time, and a time that will continue on, then you are missing something so valuable. So look at it this way, people who are listening, and I welcome Margot on Bridges Live, is that I want people to understand how you are connected to something, your first love, your first pet, your first anything. That's a connection that has been stemmed throughout time. It is just now your recognition of consciousness that you are in the present moment of the internal and the external. That is connection. This is not like random happening and what you call control chaos. This is what happens in balance. And as humans in this time, and how do you think we can be better at developing an identity of inclusion and diversity?
Yeah, so thanks for asking. I start with my own story, which is my moment of awakening around inclusion.
Mm.
Was I was living in Toronto, and I'm from Montreal, and Montreal's an island, and we are surrounded by Mohawk Nation reserves. So Montreal is unceded land of the Iroquois, and I had lived here all of my life and never met a Mohawk. Never met a Mohawk.
Wow.
And this was like normal in the bubble that I grew up in, white Anglophone bubble that I grew up in. And I found myself in Toronto, and in 1 year, I had fallen in love with a Mohawk man, and a Mohawk two-spirited woman was my best buddy in the corporation that I was working for. And I was like, whoa. So this really inspired me on a journey of how could I get here at this point, 40 years old, and having never met anybody from Mohawk Nations. And it's taken my heart ripping open for this to happen. And so I started investigating, my genealogy and
Right.
the values, beliefs, and assumptions that I was reared with, as well as, where the different strands of my family were coming from, to get to know me and how how I could actually have a worldview which excluded so many people. Now, in the same 1 year later, the face of our family was transitioned from a Caucasian face to a multiracial face. So my niece was born, Sahara. She's multiracial. My step grandson was born, Marcus. He's multiracial. And a couple of years later, My niece, I had another niece adopted from China. So, and that's it for our legacy. So, in one generation, like we've been through a lot of changes, and um, and it's the collective intelligence of all of our differences which enables us to be, beautiful.
So the one thing you mentioned two things that I'm going to key on when you said your heart was ripped open, and that's something that's so profound in your statement, because it wasn't that you opened your heart, it was torn. It
Yeah.
it wasn't something that you wanted to do, it was something that happened to you. Now, when people, and I always believe that, can we cherish life? Is it possible? Can we learn to cherish life without hitting the ripping factor of it being done to you? And if not, is this time, COVID and all of this, is this the ripping open of our living system? Would you consider this the time of it ripping open?
Such an interesting entry point. Thank you. I hope so. I mean, there's enough tension, there's enough stress that, what resonated for me, and I think across the borders from you guys around George Floyd, was like, we know this story and it's not exactly the same story. We have
Right.
our own story.
Yeah.
We're more connected with a colonial story in our
Yeah.
narrative as a country. But the violence is exactly the same, and the circumstance is exactly the same in terms of violence, deaths, and prison. Same
Yes.
story. Okay. And we've been, building and building and building and building, like we can't take it anymore. And this was just like, it felt like, the top is being ripped off, because I'm having conversations with people who, and believe me, when I graduated in 2003 as like an expert in diversity and inclusion, nobody would talk to me. Nobody would
No.
talk. And now I'm having conversations with, the door's open to the conversation now in my life.
Well, I'm glad they're talking to you, because they're definitely, there are people who are now contacting me when I talk about emotional reaction training. And how I look at emotional reaction training, I don't look at emotional intelligence. I think that's a ridiculous statement, and I just, because that's like having tree intelligence. Just because you recognize what the tree is, just because you recognize it has roots, just because you recognize that it has leaves, just recognize it has broken branches, doesn't make you tree intelligence. Emotional reaction is understanding who you are in the development of your constructs, and how you are actively activating your action. Actively activating your
Yeah.
action, right? That's emotional that's why I do emotional reaction training, because if you don't know thyself and understand where your bubble was created and how you develop in your process, then how do you understand how you are actively activating your actions? Because why wouldn't you think that your actions make sense when you have never been ripped open to include anyone else? It's impossible. And that's why, to tell someone that they're wrong, it's absolutely absurd, because they're completely, absolutely consciously right in their bubble. So we need to learn how to be better. And if this ripping open is our time, then there's going to be a lot of pain. And with this education that we're going through, what's a better way that we can look at how to, because you've been ripped open, how to move into this painful event that we're having?
So the best way of moving forward that I've come up with to date is about learning how to hold space for each other.
Mm. So the Beatles was right. Love is all we need. And when you have love, you create space.
That's it. But it's not always comfortable, right?
Say again?
It's not always comfortable, right?
No.
But I do believe that, and we're all different, and we're all moving all the time, and what that space looks like, it has to be flexible, and it's because it changes all the time, right?
So I'm glad people are having conversation, and without mentioning names, and what is some of the things that the people are starting to ask, and what did that sound like? Hello, Margot?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
Oh.
Like I said, I'm an introvert, right? So
no, I just thought with this online thing, I thought I was frozen. I was like,
no. If I freeze, I'll wave at you.
Okay.
Yeah. So different people, I guess it's I've had several people say to me, well, this is your time.
Okay.
One of the things that I do for fun is I host book clubs on whiteness. And there are more people that are interested in sitting down for a conversation, in exploring, because it's so fascinating being with people who've never recognized that they too, have a connection to race as a social construct.
Yeah.
Like, these are people who are used to talking about race like it's somebody else's thing. And I'm a doer, so just talking about things isn't really how I see myself. But I do have the ability to draw people into a conversation and assist them in self-examination.
And that's what you mentioned before, was that awareness. After after the ripping effect, there was a sense of awareness you developed, and I think that's what you're talking about now. Is that people are now, hopefully, it's awareness of what they think and what they are.
Yeah, and people need help often along the trail and support in that discovery and encouragement.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing about being ripped open through love is that you have to do that work, right? The choices don't exist because it's your life.
Right.
But people who, aren't that connected yet to their own understanding that we are all interconnected and, depend upon each other for our very existence.
Yeah. The ecosystem. We're part of the ecosystem.
So, the people who've not yet kind of made a a connection, a direct connection to that ecosystem, can you support in getting there?
And I agree. So we're doing these pieces. We're doing, I host panel discussions on mental health and awareness in the Black community, and because I really believe that the Black community has been traumatized for a very long time for post-traumatic slave disorder,
Yep.
their own PTSD. So I think its own community and several communities, there are other communities have definitely dived into their traumatization throughout the centuries. The Black community has not. The African American Black community has not. The Africans have. The continent of Africa has, but the people who have been splintered here in the United States have not. I lived in North Dakota for over 20 years, and I know that the Indians and the Sioux, and I'm very connected to them. Also, I went through shaman training. My spirit name is Spirit Running Bear. I went through my training and went through my indoctrination and had my ceremony. It took me a very long time to get through it. It was amazing. But there's a lot of pain and
Oh yeah.
and they are still working on their traumatization, and their kids are suicide and no one ever talks about it, and they're being killed, no one ever talks about it. They're being human trafficked, no one ever talks about it. They're still being ostracized and just brutally just tormented in different Indian sections of the United States and in Canada that no one ever talks about. Not the federal courts, because it's the Indian courts, it's the federal courts. It's the story has not ever been rectified, either in the Indian community, the Black community. And so with all of this, there's a lot of lives at stake that's going to hopefully be aware of how we have been splintered for a very long time. And I'm glad people are talking to you. I'm glad people are asking the questions. I'm glad people are starting to do that self-awareness and not self-gratification going, I knew who I was and this is what, but not talking about self-gratification. That's a little bit different between self-awareness. Self-awareness is removing the constructs. And that's difficult. What is some of the things that, before we go, and if people want to get a hold of you, let's do that first. If people want to contact you for diversity and the training and the education that you provide, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, thanks. I'm Margot. That's Margot at Margot Hovey, MargotHovey.com. That's Hovey. My dad used to say like lovey-dovey. Sorry, what was your
we need steps.
Yeah.
One of the steps that we can do between allowing it to rip open, now developing awareness, what's the action principle?
So what Christina Smith and I are doing is we are starting a course next week on bringing, we're starting with women together.
Okay.
From BIWOC women and white women into conversation. And we're putting them through, our training is based on from the steps of self-awareness to listening and making space for each other, to building bridges between communities, to how to be an alliance, and then next steps, how do we move together from here? And so I would say join in the conversation. I mean, best thing that you can do is to reach out across the silos of our communities and find out how you relate and what you can learn about not only each other, but yourself. Being in, a respectful presence with others.
One of the thing is that when you say that seems very harmonious. And I agree with all of it. But then you have these issues, or you see now recorded issues, because it seems like in my whole life, because of being Black, I've witnessed it before firsthand. But now you see recorded issues of certain white people. Now they have a law, the Karen law, whatever, but certain white people telling people what they can and can't do because of what they believe. Now, how do we get to that person before they open their mouth and say, you should not be here, you can't do this? We need to get to them, because getting to someone who says, you know what, I want to learn, I think that's great. But how do we get to the person that says they don't even think they need to know? How do we get to them?
I think that we have to modify what we consider to be civil, civility.
Gotcha.
Like, so that it's not okay to open your mouth like that. It's not okay. So at least shame will stop you from, doing that.
Why? We there's a term, there's a phrase that says the law can only stop you from lynching me. The law can't help you to like me. So, and that's sad, but so as long as we're not being lynched and killed legally, I think them opening their mouths, that maybe is their start. Maybe that's their awakening. Maybe them opening their mouths and spewing their thoughts is the start for them, because it's only then we'll know who they are.
Yeah, and then they'll lose their jobs.
Yeah.
They'll lose their, they'll face their own consequences when the bar for civility is raised to a respectful level.
Well, we kind of do that to the alcoholic too, right? Because even with people who are alcoholic or drug or any abuse of any, something that ruins your life, whether it be any addiction, you have to go to a certain thing, get court ordered, and be like, why are you here? Well, I lost my job, I lost my wife, I lost my family because of X, Y, Z. I think I need help. Great. I'm so glad you're here, because you're in the best possible position, because you are at the lowest you could possibly be. And now you know what the reasons are. You are an addicted, but here's why. And let's move forward. And I think maybe there's going to be these type of courses for these people that they have to go to, like you said, to understand that, wow, I didn't know I was addicted to my thoughts that I thought was so concrete and correct, because it's a sickness.
It certainly is.
Thank you, Miss Margot. Thank you for coming on Bridges Live with me. Thank you for visiting with everyone. And I know there's so much work for us all to do, and we'll be in contact. And I just want to share with our synergy and our connection, and let us all have those conversations about what we can do to open our own awareness up, to really bring it all together. There's a ripping effect. There's going to be painful, but there's an awareness that's going to be brightful. So thank you so much.
Have a beautiful day.
You have a beautiful day.